Hello. So, I've been reading Julius Evola's book called Revolt against the Modern World. And I'm only like 3 sections in, but I just wanted to discuss today Evola's distinction, or is it Evola? I'm not sure. Evola. Some Italian viewer can hopefully tell me. But I want to talk about his distinction between traditional and modern ways of living, or really a dichotomy between traditional man and modern man. And, you know, as with all dichotomies, except for the concept-object dichotomy, as with all dichotomies, it makes an important distinction. It might not be the whole story, but it makes a really important distinction. And I think it's a distinction that we particularly need to understand in our day and age, because the culture that we're living in right now is not only modern in almost every conceivable way, but it's also extremely anti-traditional. So, what does it mean to be traditional? Evola's sense of tradition is, I guess you can relate it to a concept of health in human beings, right? A healthy human being 20,000 years ago, well, let me put it this way, the standard that we uphold to be health, that which we consider healthy, is hopefully a standard that would apply universally, without any historical component, without any contingencies. A healthy person 20,000 years ago should be the same as a healthy person. The concept of health should mean the same thing, no matter when or where it's applied. And it's a loose analogy, but the point is that a traditional society or a traditional culture is the type of culture that respects ways of living that are perennial, that are not contingent historically, that are not simply the result of whatever processes led up to it, but it's like the recognition of a universal principle that can be applied for all time. A traditional way of life is the sort of way of life that aims to orient itself to the world and act in the world in such a way that can be sustained and continue forever. So Julius Evola makes this distinction between being and becoming. The traditional man represents being, whereas the modern man represents becoming. And so there's an order to the world, there's a principle that the modern man, or that the traditional man recognizes and attempts to embody. That, I think, is the main issue here, is that the traditional man embodies a principle And that principle applies universally. And he also talks about a distinction between like divinity and humanness. He says the sense of the traditional always comes from that which is non-human. And the way I think about that is like, shit, I'm hitting some traffic. Gotta pay attention to the traffic. Can't get into a car wreck. That's what you call a skirp. You didn't see it, the phone fell over. Hold on, I'll put it back up. There we go. I had the skirp. I'm sorry. Anyway. Well, let me put it this way, because I'm having a hard time sort of clarifying these thoughts. I was just reading this today, so I don't have it all sorted out in my own head. But the way I see it is, so the traditional man aims at some sort of principle that can be sustained, that renews itself, and produces a healthy state of being, a healthy state of a culture that can last and exist indefinitely, because it is following a principle of nature outside of itself that puts it into harmony with its environment, and also with itself. Now that does place limitations on how you should act. The traditional man is constantly comparing, well, not constantly, but the traditional man seeks to embody the principle of his actions in a way that can be sustained. Whereas, by contrast, the modern man doesn't believe that any principles are more important or higher than his own feelings or his own desires, and so he never subjugates his feelings and desires in favor of something higher, in favor of something that is more long-lasting. And I'm reminded right now of one of the stories in The Children of Odin, one of the legends of Norse mythology, where the Aesir are trying to get a wall built around their great city and of Asgard. And one of the frost giants, I think, comes along and starts building the wall for them with his horse. And if they finish the wall by a certain set period, then the frost giant would get Freya as his wife, and also the sun and moon would transfer to his possession. And so the gods were pretty nervous about this prospect of this frost giant taking Freya, who is the goddess of nature, and also the sun and moon. They were very afraid of this. They did not want that to happen. And so what happened was Loki disguised himself as a horse, because this frost giant's horse was doing most of the work. The horse was able to actually lift up these giant boulders and set them into place on the wall, and he was doing a lot of work. And so without the horse, this frost giant would never be able to finish the task. And so what Loki did was he approached the horse and basically taunted it, saying, "You're not free, you're basically a slave, all you do is build this wall, and you can't act according to what you really desire." And that's all it took, and the horse went over and abandoned his project at the wall, and the wall wasn't built on time because of this trick that Loki played. And so that sort of reminds me of what has been offered to the modern man. Loki is kind of like the devil figure here. He tempts the horse to abandon the higher cause, the principles by which his actions were oriented. And in abandoning his principle, he gets some freedom. He's liberated in a sense. But what happens is a disaster. The result of it is the wall doesn't get built and the project fails. And I think that story is the moral of what's offered by the traditional life, and also the temptations that would lead someone away from a traditional life, the temptations that lead to the modern life of focusing only on your desires, doing what makes you happy, whatever that means, and serving only your ephemeral emotions, your whims and your fancies, instead of orienting yourself to a higher principle of order that you can then live by. And even though you then have to sacrifice some of your, I guess, free will, in a sense, you have to sacrifice the lower bodily urges for the higher principle. But like, what an initiation, bring in another concept of the initiation in traditional societies. An initiation ritual was supposed to take the child, which was guided only by these whims and urges and desires and momentary sort of urges, and replaces them with the principles of the culture of the tribe. Without that initiation, where the child is destroyed and the man is reborn, the traditional man is reborn in his place, without that switch from focusing only on your personal whims to ordering yourself by a higher principle. That's what an initiation was supposed to do, but it's like we don't have that anymore. So most people in the modern age just go by their whims and desires, but what we need to do is move back to a traditional lifestyle. Anyway, I wish I could talk more, but I don't have any more time. I'm here at work. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.